So, just to start, as you guys can probably guess from my accent, I am not a local Kiwi. I moved here fairly recently from Canada, so I am a new immigrant in this lovely country. Is anyone else here from a different country? All right, I see some hands. Chris, where are you from?
I'm originally from South Africa.
Solid. And how long have you been in New Zealand?
Since 2007.
Ah, okay. Pretty cool. So you're at like citizenship timeline at this point then.
Yeah, I think we got it a while ago now.
Very cool. I can almost hear your Kiwi accent as well. You've adopted that too.
I moved here when I was 5, so it's
Oh,
been a
perfect.
while.
Awesome. Anyone else here from a different country? Sorry, Christelle, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Where are you from?
I'm from Philippines.
From the Philippines. Awesome. How long have you been in New Zealand?
Yeah. I think it's coming up to 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Jojo, I think you raised your hand as well? No? Okay. Sorry, anyone else from another country? Chen. Oh man, everyone who's on video is from a different country, I think, except for Jojo and Tim. It's actually easier to go the other way of who's not from a different country. Which is great. New Zealand is very welcoming of immigrants, kind of. Now that we're here. Cool. Sorry, so Jess, I think you raised your hand? Yeah? Where are you from?
Oh, yeah. I'm from China.
From China. Awesome.
Yeah.
How long have you been in New Zealand?
About 7, 8 years, I think.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
So just to get a sense of the audience, how many of you guys are in the Auckland area versus Wellington versus other parts of town or the country, sorry? Where's everyone based? See some Wellingtons. Auckland.
Auckland.
All right. Got a Hamilton in here. Wellington. Ah, we got a Dunedin. All right, South Island folk. All right.
I'm
Auckland,
from
Christchurch.
Paraparaumu, so near Wellington.
Okay. Cool. Very awesome. I was just down in Wellington last week, and I'm from Auckland. And I was down in Wellington, and I've noticed that everyone in Wellington seems to love being in Wellington. I found that they were just giving me the hard sell the entire time to come move to Wellington. So yeah. All right. Cool. And then the other thing I just wanted to poll the audience on, because I know we've got a couple of different groups here today. Who's here for Salesforce training versus AWS training versus Azure training? What brings you here today? We got Azure, AWS, Azure, AWS, Azure, AWS, Azure, AWS. Salesforce. Okay, I'm not the only one. All right, we've got some Salesforce people. All right, cool. Salesforce and AWS. Awesome. Azure with the overlap of Azure with Salesforce. Yes, and we're going to talk about that today too. Very cool. All right. So for today, I'll get into it. Essentially, what I'm hoping to do is do a little bit of my backstory, my journey into Salesforce, and then talking about getting your first tech job. My focus is going to be Salesforce as like someone who recruits people into Salesforce. But the principles should apply for AWS and Azure as well. And then I'll talk about different career paths that you might be interested in. And then we'll also have some time for Q&A. All right. Does that sound like a good plan for everyone? I know there's lots of people who don't have their cameras on. I will not judge you if you're eating lunch You know, the rest of the group might also enjoy whatever, like, oh, you've got like Kentucky Fried Chicken. Oh man, we're all jealous. So like, that's okay too. All right. Or just stay off camera, whatever you're most comfortable with. All right. All right. So let's dive in. So my backstory. So I went to university and quickly became an accountant. And this was the path of least resistance for me. There were recruiters on campus being like, hey, anyone want to be an accountant? We'll pay you money. And I'm like, I'm here for money. That's a great idea. Let's do that. So I was an accountant, a chartered accountant, and I was in public practice accounting for about 5 to 6 years. And I was really good at it, but I didn't know if I was actually enjoying it. I think I lied to myself that I was enjoying it because you kind of have to do that to like get by. But then I eventually got to the point where, you know what, there's got to be more to life than accounting. I don't know if anyone here is coming from another profession that has had that same type of reaction of, okay, there's got to be more to life than what I'm doing right now. Is anyone here from another profession? All right, here, put it in the chat. Let's have a discussion. Fellow accountants. Oh man, we're gonna talk later. Teaching, librarian, electric, food technologist, psychology and philosophy. Yeah, I also have a minor in philosophy. That was interesting as well. Student, sales and marketing. Yeah, so what's interesting is we have this great broad group of people here. Interestingly, I think it's Abby, right? Who is a pharmacist. Abby, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, so I actually have someone on my Salesforce team who also came from being a pharmacist.
I know her, Marianne. I did the course with her.
What a lovely small world New Zealand is. That's incredible. What brought you here today as far as your move from pharmacy?
So I've already done the course, the Salesforce course. So I'm now working as a Salesforce admin at a KiwiSaver company.
Oh, nice. Very cool. So investments.
Yep.
And how does your first Salesforce job compare to pharmacy?
Very chill in comparison.
Yeah, you like it more?
Yeah, love
Yeah,
working from home.
absolutely. And that's what it's all about. You know, we're having this conversation here, but if I turn my body slightly, my cat's right over there, right? Working from home. How amazing is that? You know? Abby, great to have you with us. We also had a teacher, Karina.
Yes, sorry.
No,
Hi.
no need to apologize. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so I used to be a teacher, primary school teacher, and always had a passion for technology and went back to uni, did my master's in digital business.
Oh, wow.
And then heard all this stuff about Salesforce, Azure, AWS, didn't know, and realized I needed to learn what these platforms are about. So here I am, someone of tech.
Very cool. How long were you a teacher for?
Oh, a couple of years. I taught overseas as well. I did like a English language teaching in South Korea.
Mhm.
And the technology over there is just, it's amazing. So yeah, you just, when you look at what they do with all their devices and platforms and the kids as well, it's truly amazing. So yeah, I just decided I needed to try the industry, and yep, here I am.
Okay. So nothing pushed you out of teaching so much as you want to try something new.
Yeah, it was more the passion, just following my passion.
Good. I'm glad people are here today for their passions, because I think one thing that I have learned in my life is just because you are good at something is not a good enough reason to do that thing. as my career in accounting will tell us. Cool. And then one last one. We have a food technologist with us, Jess.
Yes,
you do?
hi. Yeah.
Hey. So food technologist, can you give me a rundown of just as far as what that means?
So food technology can cover quite a lot of things within food, no matter it's about the food packaging. So all the food products we can see from the supermarket, about the food packaging, about the nutritional information, about the labeling information, and about food safety and compliance, those kind of information printed on the packaging. They are all being taken care of the food technologies. And also about the recipe development, like the baby infant formula, how can the formula becomes more and more nutrition? That's what food technologies do.
Right. Okay. And
Yeah.
now you're looking for a career in Azure, right?
Yeah, there was a chance came to me, which is this Azure trainings, because I was actually learning a web development and design course. So, I mean, this is a really good chance for me to explore my knowledge and to see more technologies and see where my interest is at. That's why I take it.
Nice. And that's the thing, is it's so different from what you've been exposed to historically, right?
Yes or no?
No.
Because I think food technology or food industry is a quite traditional industry. People are still using very old theory and old machine to do the production and the research. And that's why I think it's sort of pretty different from the IT. But meanwhile, because it's a traditional industry, it needs a lot of improvement. It needs a new technology to lead the improvement, such as when you do the research in the laboratory, you actually really need some help from the new technology to reduce the labor work. There are so many repeat work which is involved in the laboratory. But I don't think people are thinking about to use a new tech to repeat their labor work. They are just continue on their labor work.
Right.
So that's why I think it's both irrelevant but also relevant. That industry need the technology.
And I probably want to make clear that none of our experiences are totally irrelevant, even if they're in different industries or different technologies, because we bring that with us. And one of the things that have been so interesting working with so many different people from so many different backgrounds is different ways of problem solving as a result of what we've seen in the past. And so, you know, I might look at a problem differently than someone else only because we've seen different things. And it's very interesting to see that. And then the establishment of best practices around that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
So drilling back into my journey. So I was an accountant. I still am an accountant, but I don't do much accounting anymore. So when I realized that there had to be more to life than accounting, you know, I didn't really have any other skills formally. When you go into accounting, all of your electives have to be accounting. So that's everything that I knew. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to do an MBA to learn more about business and have a more well-rounded view outside of accounting. And while I was doing my MBA, I had the time to take an Excel course. And so again, it's not Azure, it's not Salesforce, it's just Excel. But what I was doing was taking that course and learning new tools in Excel that I wanted to use to change industries, change careers, right? So for me, it was always a childhood dream of mine to go into the games industry, right? I don't know if anyone here enjoys video games as a hobby. Yeah, Jojo, definitely. All right, anyone else? All right, just me and Jojo, that's okay. So anyways, you know, I was that kid who, like, even at like 12 years old, I'd like go on to like Nintendo's careers page and be like, oh yeah, I could be a graphics designer. I could do all these different roles. That's what, when I grow up, I'm going to go into games. Then I became an accountant. So what I was doing was taking the things I was learning in this Excel course and making a full-length video game entirely in Microsoft Excel. I used what I knew in order to develop new skills in game design and QA and all of that. And so my path to the games industry was I then launched this Excel game. I just kind of put some marketing material out there, went to sleep, and when I woke up, 200,000 people had played it, and it had gone viral. And it was a very good experience for me, especially at that MBA, to be like, okay, well, how do you handle viral media marketing and all of these other business things that tie to each one of my MBA courses? And it became a case study for us. So I used that to launch a career into the games industry, which I loved. I remember, you know, sending off and getting paid for my first invoice. And I was like, how is this possible? I didn't do any work, and you're paying me for it because I just had fun for the last 2 weeks playing games. It was really good. And then it's definitely the most fun I've had in my career. But I was getting to an age where I felt like I needed a better sense of purpose. Just because you're having fun, like you're spending 8 hours a day doing the same thing, you want to be, or at least for me, I want to be making the world a better place. And there really wasn't a way to do that inside of the games industry. And so I took a pivot and I joined a environmental health and safety software company. And for them, they brought me on in order to project manage a Salesforce implementation, right? So again, I was not supposed to have any Salesforce knowledge, any Salesforce skills. I was just there to project manage it to make sure it would actually get complete. And so that was my introduction to Salesforce. And their admin showed me Salesforce reporting. And I was like, hold on, wait a minute here, guys. This is all of your data, like in one spreadsheet all at once. Why would I ever use Excel again for anything? Salesforce is the future, right? So I got hooked into Salesforce as a result of that. So I'm project managing and I'm working with consultants, and consultants are telling me, oh, this is impossible. We can't do this. This is a limitation of the platform, things of that nature. So what am I supposed to do? The business has certain requirements. The consultants are saying it's not possible. I'm thinking I could do this in Excel. How can we not do this in Salesforce, right? And so that's when I got deeper into Salesforce and I got my Platform Developer 1 certification, really just to be able to call BS on the consultants, just to be able to say, wait a minute, you guys aren't thinking about this problem correctly. Have you tried this type of creative solution? All right, so, and that's really what got me hooked. Then I was like a proper Salesforce admin developer, really into the thick of things. So that was my journey to my first Salesforce job. So I'd like to take a quick pause here just to check in with those of you here who are currently in your first Salesforce or Azure or AWS job. It's your first one. Is anyone in that boat? No, kind of. Some consulting, maybe some volunteering. No.
I think
Okay.
most people here are learning at the moment, like they're kind of a month in or so.
Excellent.
Felix is working at Z Energy, and Abby is working as a Salesforce admin, and they've all done the course in the past. But I think everyone else here is on the grind. You know, they're in the thick of it.
Mhm. Okay, so a lot of people here are, I guess, are working to get your first job in industry, right? Okay, so I'm gonna pivot for a bit to talk about that then. So I currently recruit, for junior roles in Salesforce, and I've been in the room for recruiting in other roles. So what are the kinds of things you need to do to make sure that you stand out in those roles? The first thing to be cognizant of is that we do, or at least I have used Salesforce certifications as a filter in the past. It is an unfortunate reality when dealing with hundreds of applications, which is what you run into for junior roles, right? If I'm looking for senior roles or architect roles, there's less of an emphasis on certifications because they have more accomplishments and things that they've used the technology to do. But in a junior role, certifications are that indicator to me that this person does actually have the wherewithal to do the role, and is genuinely interested in doing the role. And so that acts as a good filter. I know less about the certification paths in AWS and Azure than I do in Salesforce. So I can't really help as far as the specifics. But be aware that there are different roles, and the certifications that you get should be closely aligned with the role that you're trying to get, right? So in Salesforce, for example, we have functionals, right? So functionals are more administrative type of roles that are more closely aligned with the business, right? So they don't look at code, but they do look at business requirements, automations, permissions, that kind of thing. We have developers that are heavily involved in code, right? And they have certifications that are consistent with that, right? So that is essentially the way to get through the door, so that we can have a look at your resume and your resume stands out and doesn't get lost in that shuffle. So on the topic of certifications, a lot of people I know in this room and in general are looking at this career as a career pivot, right? So you've done something in the past, maybe it's been 5 years since you've ever written an exam, maybe you thought you'd never have to write an exam before, again in your life. You've already graduated, right? You're leaving exams behind. Is anyone here stressing about certification exams? Yeah, we got a couple, we got a few. Yeah, and that's totally fair. Yep, Peru as well. Yeah. So what worries you? I'm just gonna poll the audience for some to raise some anxieties. And I know this is kind of a safe space, but it's also being recorded. So what worries you about an exam? What are the kinds of things that concern you?
I think the big one is like if failed to get the certification.
Mm-hmm. Fear of failure. Anyone else?
I think sometimes, I don't have the best memory. I'm really good at looking things up. I'm really fast at looking things up, but just being able to call things off the top of my head, sometimes I struggle with. And when there's so much to learn, remembering everything for the exam, definitely a bit of anxiety.
Yep, absolutely. Sorry, is there another one? Oh, managing time constraints in the test itself, brain panicking, freezing during the exam. Excellent. Okay, so the 3 comments that were actually just raised are actually the most common considerations that people have. And I've seen these things so much that I actually wrote an article about how to deal with each of them. So in the chat, you don't need to read it now or anything like that, but if any of this resonated with you, I highly recommend reading this article that I wrote. Because all of these problems actually have very clear solutions, right? So, if you're afraid of failing, right, not getting the exam, right, that fear, that fear is this loss aversion. You're actually making the actual consequences worse in your mind. You're actually torturing yourself with that. So rather than telling yourself the story of what failure will feel like, what failure will look like. Maybe our friends will judge us or will fall behind. Rather than live in that story, let's talk about the actual consequences of failing the exam, right? And the actual consequences of failing the exam are, well, you can rewrite the exam, right? Maybe it costs a little bit of money. Maybe it costs less money to rewrite the exam, right? And my personal favorite, you can remember the questions that you didn't know on your first try, right? And then you can study those questions. So then for your rewrite, the questions you had the hardest time with now become your biggest strength, right? And this becomes an iterative process, right? No one knows how many times you failed an exam. They only know that you succeeded, right? That's the beauty of it, right? When I became a chartered accountant, and I had to go through this chartered accountant exams, it cost thousands of dollars to write the exam. You could only rewrite it once a year, right? As far as the consequences. And I could get fired if I didn't pass, right? So real consequences of failure, right? By comparison, for these certifications, you can rewrite almost within 24 hours. The costs are usually like they're relevant, but also relatively negligible. And sometimes you might get reimbursed for it depending on your work situation. And you have resources available to you. Sorry, Chris asked a question. Do they have a pool of questions or is it always the same set? It's usually a pool of questions, but the types of content are going to be the same, right? So let's say I'm learning about Salesforce and I'm going to say permissions just because I know that's going to apply to everyone in this room. So let's say I'm bombing the questions on permissions. And I feel that when I'm writing the exam, right? When you're writing the exam, you know in that moment, oh yeah, I got this question, next, I'm good, next. And then you come up to a permissions question, you're like, you know what, I'm going to have to guess at this, right? Well, what that means is when you're done writing the exam, and if you fail, now you know permissions is an area to study, and then you can rewrite the exam the next day, right? That's what I'm trying to encourage, is not to fear failure of the exam, but to embrace failure of the exam. It's actually not a bad thing. And I know I might regret this because this is being recorded, but I failed my first exam. All right. So my first Platform Developer 1 exam, I failed, right? And the reason why I failed was because I wasn't actually studying for the exam. I was studying for how to do my job better, right? Which means there were parts of the exam that weren't applicable to my company, but were on the exam. And so that caused me to change how I was studying. So when I rewrote the exam later that week, I passed it, right? And so it's an iterative process. You learn through these things, and it's totally worthwhile. What was the other thing? I think memory, right? So it's hard to remember everything, right? So there are two key tips here. One is don't study too much content, right? So on the Salesforce side of things, if you listen to Salesforce, they're like, oh yeah, study all this like study material. You've got like 40 to 60 hours worth of study material, right? That will give, and if you go through that, what you'll actually end up with is actually this false sense of security that you'll feel like, okay, I've now read everything that's going to be on the exam. I'm ready for the exam. And that's actually not how this works, because in this type of situation, what matters is your ability to recall very specific information quickly is how you succeed on an exam, right? So what you want to do is take advantage of the recency effect, right? So rather than giving yourself a big, long time to study, a lot of people will say like, okay, well, I'm going to go through all this content at, 3 hours a week. And so I'll get it done in 3 months or something like that, right? Rather than doing that, give yourself time off to actually crunch through the content, right? So for me, I'm actually doing my 12th certification over the Christmas break because I've got time off from work. right? So I may as well focus and do it. And my study plan is I am going to take 2 days to read through all the content while I'm making notes. Then the day of the exam, I'm going to quickly review my notes. Anything that I need to memorize will be in those notes, and then write the exam. And that's it, right? When you shorten the amount of time, not only do you remember stuff better, but you also mitigate that loss of version risk that we were talking about before, right? Because now you're not actually committing as much time, you're not investing as much in that exam, right? Does that make sense for everyone here? Everyone good? All right. As a result of this talk, does anyone feel better about potentially writing an exam? Maybe? A little worse? Hopefully not. I have a question. Where do you read through the content? Okay. So great question, and it's going to differ depending on what technology you're here for, right? So for Salesforce has Trailhead, which is their official like learning platform. But there's also a whole bunch of different ways you can learn depending on how you. This is a bit of a self-awareness thing, but you kind of have to know how you like to learn, right? So for example, some people really like reading books. Some people hate reading books, right? Some people like presentations. Some people like content that they can go in at their own pace, right? There's also study guides that are available. There's also practice exams that you can do. That's just within the Salesforce ecosystem. It might be different in the other ones. But yeah, so as far as the content, for me, what I've been doing, or at least what I recommend for your first certification, is to get a study guide, right? These study guides are curated content just focused on passing the exam. So this way you're not actually learning about all of this different stuff. Like I think AWS developer, you don't need to know about the entire AWS tech stack. You just need to know about key specific things that are going to be on the exam, right? If you can get a study guide, it will help focus your study so that you can memorize those things and regurgitate it back on an exam. All right, I got another question in here. What were the challenges that you faced during the transition of changing the industry, and how did you face those challenges? That is a good question that I did not prepare for. Okay. First challenge for me was going from accounting to tech. And I was sorry, Amber's got study guides coming up on her exam prep. Awesome. So Amber's going to hook you guys up with study guides. All right. Use those. That's awesome. Sorry, back to the question. For me, it was a very much a different way of working, right? I'd always been an accountant. I'd always been consulting. So changing industries into the games industry, I needed to change the way I was communicating with stakeholders, to communicate with them at their level, right? So I remember having a conversation with the CEO about his games projects, and that he was burning through money and that he wouldn't be able to complete his projects unless we made some significant cuts to key features of the games. And like, he didn't really understand this. And I think a lot of that is because a lot of people look at cash in the bank account, right? And if you have cash in your bank account, you're okay, right? And so I was like, okay, how do I explain this in a way that he would understand? And so I was like, okay, well, financially, you would be better off closing the doors and buying every one of your employees a Ford Focus each month for the next year than to continue making this game, right? That put things into perspective, because now I was using frames of reference that he knew, right? And so when you do change industries, you have to keep in mind that not everyone is coming to the table with the same experience that you have, and so you need to change the way that you communicate to be at their level. So that would be one of the examples that I would use for that. Cool. All right. What else do I got here? Getting social. Okay. Okay. So at this part of my journey, I was working with Salesforce in tech at a company that used Azure, that they built their product on, right? And And so that was an interesting experience because, again, my focus was on Salesforce, not on Azure. I'm also going to mispronounce Azure like a billion times, but like I checked the Wikipedia and there's no like consistent way of pronouncing it. So I'm sorry to everyone if it doesn't align with what you're familiar with. But yeah, and so they used Azure as part of their product. So they were using like Azure Active Directory to do all of the authentication and all of that. And it was really cool to actually see, here's what's possible to build on Azure, right? We built a $700 million product on Azure, right? So the skills that you're learning now, whether you go into, consulting or working at a tech company or even starting your own, right? Anyone here hoping to go the entrepreneur route? No, that's okay. Sometimes you need some experience first so that like someone else is paying for your mistakes and then you learn them and then you go off on your own. That's okay too. But yeah, and so, Azure was this great tool to actually build the tech stack. And we had that integrated with the back office. So Azure and Salesforce played really nicely together. We used Salesforce for the entire business, right? So from marketing to sales to services to support to finance, anything that was the business was running on Salesforce. Anything that was the product was running on Azure, right? So yeah, so I was doing that, did that for 5 years, did a vacation to New Zealand in 2019. And that opened my eyes and changed my life goals. It was so lovely here. People are so nice. As a Canadian, over the last 30 years, I thought Canadians were nice. Then I went to New Zealand. I was like, Canadians are polite. New Zealanders are nice. There's a difference. And so I really liked it. And then when I came back from my trip to Canada, I was kind of, I don't want to say depressed, but I was definitely sad. I'd like look around. There weren't any like sheep on my morning commute. It just didn't feel right. Didn't feel like home anymore. So I decided right then I was going to uproot my life, move to New Zealand. Got a job with Xero, which again was only possible because of all of the experience that I had on Salesforce. And I was able to live out my dreams because of it, to a degree, because then COVID happened and I was trapped in Canada. So I was in Canada working New Zealand hours for nights. That part sucked. But then I eventually got here working for Xero, and it's awesome to be here now in Auckland. I'm looking at the domain right now. Okay. So now working at Xero is a bit of a different beast as well. So I went from a company, valued at 700 million to Xero, which was valued at 11 billion, right? And so the scale is completely different. On our Salesforce team, we have 70 professionals all doing Salesforce, right? By comparison, we had previously had 6 professionals doing Salesforce. So the experience that you're going to have in these different companies are radically different. And you kind of need to know. Sorry, I'm going to take a step back. I'm confident that all of you will be successful in your journeys, right? You might be in a situation where for your first Salesforce job or your first AWS job or your first Azure job, people are throwing offers at you. It's entirely possible you'll have that choice. What you need to do is figure out, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn, right? And overall, there really are 3 key paths in this industry, right? And they're all going to be the same skills, right? The same skills that you're learning today, but in wildly different contexts. That's going to change what you learn, right? And what your day-to-day is like, right? So, usually the low-hanging fruit is consultancies, right? I don't know if anyone here is already planning on going to work at a consultancy. So consultancies are great because there's lots of breadth and depth, but it's also less socially engaging. You don't get to see the end user satisfaction. So you don't get to build systems on top of systems on top of systems. You don't get that long-term benefit. So it's great for building up a lot of depth, learning a lot in a very short period of time. If that motivates you, then definitely go the consulting route, right? If you want to build, like invest in a company and build your systems on top of systems and really see that growth, if stakeholder happiness is what motivates you, then I would recommend going a different route, right? And so if you go to work at companies, right, there's smaller companies. So previously, I actually referred to our team as Salesforce Cowboys, because at a small company, there are very few rules and you can get away with almost everything, right? So what's great about this is you can add a lot of business value very quickly, right? You're there to move fast, break things, deliver outcomes, right? Working at a smaller company is a much faster pace, right? So if you like delivering fast, then small companies are probably best for you. Now, there's the alternative, right? Which is working at big companies like Xero, right? So Xero, you've got big technical projects there's a huge focus on best practice, right? So if you want to learn how to do a very specific role, the best possible way to do that role, then going to a big company would be the right fit for you, right? So they're all drastically different, and it all really depends on what you want to do, right? Do you want to have breadth or do you want to have depth, right? And each one of those is on that spectrum. And what's great about working at a company like Xero is we have a ton of people, we've got 70 people that are all insanely good at one specific thing, right? So some of the people who are the best in the world at that one specific area. So it's really good to be able to learn through them and to be able to pull them in for advice. So that's really good. On the flip side, you don't see as much, right? Because you become one of those people as well, right? So if you look at how big Salesforce is or how big AWS is, right? Your focus is on one particular area and mastering that at a large company. Cool. I'm going to pivot now to just some questions that we had in the chat. But given that we have 15 minutes left, probably this is a good time for Q&A in general. I hope so far the talk has been helpful as far as guiding you in your learning journey as well as your career journey. Those were really the two key themes I wanted to help with. I hope I didn't spend too much time talking about myself, just using myself more as a story to understand, where I've been and how I got there. Okay. So, question from Anchor. How long did it take you to master Salesforce to an acceptable level? I don't really want to answer this question only because of what we said before. Everyone is coming into this role with different skills, right? So, with Salesforce, while I had no Salesforce skills, I was previously programming throughout my entire life as a hobby, right? And so I knew what variables were. I knew, like a lot of the fundamentals I already knew. And then I got, I mentioned I had an Excel game that went viral. I went real deep into data management, because of, fundamental Excel skills. So I brought that all to the table before I even started my first Salesforce cert or even logging into Salesforce. So I don't think, when you start with Salesforce, that's T equals 0, right? You really do bring all of your skills, all of your life experiences to that job that you've previously had, because a lot of those skills are transferable. So that's my answer to that. I know it's not like an exact number if you're looking for a number of months, but it's going to depend. It's going to be different for every person. Peru. Which is more important for the Salesforce admin role? Process-focused approach or results-focused approach? Peru, you still on the call?
Yeah, I'm still listening.
Awesome. Okay. So can you dive into that? What is your concern?
Oh, yes. So I was trying to understand whether in Salesforce we have to be doing every steps right, or should we just have a project and then just deliver that? Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, and so the answer to that is it's going to actually depend on what kind of company you're working for, right? So this is the earlier discussion that I was having as far as working with a big company or a small company, right? If you work with a big company, it's going to be very process focused, right? The path to production is important, the quality management is important, the process is key because you have so many different interconnected systems that if you fail at any part of the process, you're going to break something, right? That's the reality when you're working at a large company. When you're working at a small company, there's a lot less tech in that tech stack, which means you can get away with being less process focused, right? There's fewer dependencies, there's fewer things that can go wrong, and you can be more results focused. So it's not necessarily what's important for the admin role as much as it is what's important for the company you're at, right? And if you have a preference, right? Like I know some people who hate process because they look at it as an obstacle that gets in their way. You know, that's fine. Be self-aware about that. Try to work at a smaller company, right? That's not going to have those processes, right? If you're someone like me who loves building processes, work at a larger company, and that's cool too, right? Eric, earlier you talked about having qualifications when recruiting junior employees. What other things would you look for? And specifically for Xero, I plan on applying to the graduate software role next year. Is there any advice you might have to be able to gain an edge over other candidates? Ooh, this is competitive. Eric, where are you?
Yes, hi.
Hey.
That's me.
All right. So, for graduates at Xero at the very least, okay, so I'm going to add some context here because there's the graduate program and then there's the associate role, right? So the graduate program is like really like fresh out of university people, and there isn't really an expectation to have Salesforce certifications. So if you are applying to the graduate program and you qualify for that, certainly having Salesforce certifications will differentiate you from other people. I will also say that the graduate roles are crazy competitive, and the people who applied were stupid smart. I know that's an oxymoron, but like it was so impressive to see these people straight out of university. I think we gave them like case studies, presentations. Like some of these people, even though they didn't have the Salesforce experience, they had business acumen, they had presentation skills, they had all of these other things that were like, we need this on our team. You know, they're going to bring this to the table. So that is, that's the challenge there, right? So certainly if you have certifications, that will help you get into that process. But it's also very competitive even once you're in there, because there's some real smart people out there. Does that help?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Jojo, did you have any programming experience before doing your developer cert? If not, how easy was it to pick up Apex and become a Salesforce developer? All right, Jojo. So I have been programming as a hobby ever since I was about 8 years old. I learned at an early age that I do not have great physical skills. I know that kind of sucks to hear, but the sooner I accepted it, the happier I was. So if I wanted to be creative, I wasn't, you know, taking a paintbrush and making a masterpiece. You know, I wasn't, you know, doing woodworking. I couldn't do these things effectively. My brain just didn't work that way. But programming on a computer, that gave me the opportunity to be creative because I could create, and the thing would actually look like the thing that was in my head. I was like, okay, this is something I can do. So that has been a hobby my entire life. So as a result of that, I did lean on that for the developer cert. It did make learning Apex a lot easier because I had that previous experience. That being said, when you're working on a Salesforce platform, there's so much more you need to learn. Like, I actually took a 4-day course. So Salesforce offers these in-person courses. So I took a 4-day course to prep for that exam. And really all that information did, everything I brought in, really just meant that first day was kind of just refresher for me. I already knew everything in the first day. But the next 3 days were all new and like crazy stuff to know, right? You don't think of these things like working with big data and efficiencies of code. Not something you have to worry about when you're doing it as a hobby, right? When you're working with millions of records, yeah, it kind of matters, right? Processing times and all of that, governor limits. So that was really the challenge for me with Apex, was learning all that new stuff. Is that cool? All right. Okay, next one. Chris, does Xero use Azure or AWS or neither? Great question. So Xero uses Salesforce and AWS, right? So, even I had to learn about AWS as part of this role. I can now talk about S3 buckets. I know what that is. So we use AWS. It's the back end of our product. We use it a lot for like custom integrations. It's all over the company. AWS is really impressive as a tool set because you can just really do a lot of custom things with it. So Xero is built on AWS. Any other questions for a Q&A? Anything top of mind, right? Think about yourself, your Salesforce journey, your AWS journey, your Azure journey. What's next for you? Can I help? Jojo.
As a recruiter, when you're looking, I know you said you filter through for Salesforce like certifications.
Mhm.
Would you also look at like Salesforce user experience, or maybe, if you've gone from using Salesforce and reporting and that sort of stuff into doing admin and getting certifications, is that something that you'd also look at as a recruiter?
It is something that I would look at. It changes depending on size of company. So when I was recruiting for a big company, the certifications were really like the first filter, and then I could look at other things. When recruiting for a smaller company, those other things had more relevance. They had more weight. I had fewer applications to sort through, right? Like the unfortunate reality is regardless of whether or not you're working at a big company or a little company, you're only one recruiter, right? And so you're asking the same recruiter to deal with 10 applications or 200 applications, right? And so that's the that's the part of the process that doesn't scale effectively, and so we have to filter.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
No problem. Similarly, if you're working for a really small company, like you can cold call people. I did that earlier on and got involved in a startup. Like there's no problem with that. Eric, I plan on doing solutions architect certification later on. Would that help / have an impact in applying for solution architect roles in the industry, even if I have no hands-on experience? Eric, are you planning on getting the certification prior to getting any experience?
So by experience, I meant sort of like projects that I could do.
Yeah. So one of the things that has worked pretty effectively, at least for people who came here, was sometimes it helps even to just do get your first role as a volunteer role for a not-for-profit, because you're being exposed to their org, to their configuration, and it makes it a lot easier for you to then talk the talk in an interview, right? If you have a lot of certifications and no experience, it's going to become problematic to pass that interview. You'll get the interview because you have a lot of certifications, and that first filter, you'll pass that, not a problem. But without any experience, you're going to run into problems at the interview. Does that make more sense?
Yep.
Cool. Chris, hey, you played the game. That's awesome. Thank you. Responded to wrong Chris. Okay, both Chris's here have played the game, which is nice. Any other questions? All right. Everyone feeling pumped and excited about their learning journey, about the additional exams they're going to write for certifications, about their first role in industry? Who's excited for these things? Are these things scary, or you're looking forward to them, right? New careers, new paths, new opportunities, right? In a couple of years, you guys will be giving this talk. I'll be in the audience, right? How cool is that? All right, sweet.
Awesome. Well, we'll probably wrap it up there. Cary, thank you so much. I think that was super, probably one of the most interactive or engaging guest speakers we've had in a long, long time. So yeah, really loved that. I was taking notes the whole time. I've got notes to come back to, 3 paths of industry, getting Salesforce to an acceptable level, what do you need for your first role? I mean, you covered so many good things there. Each of those could be kind of their own little lesson. So yeah, really fantastic. Thank you so much. I know everyone is going to be thinking about this for ages. So if everyone in the chat, just put in a thank you. And yeah, if people want to reach out, Cary, is there a way that they can reach out to you or connect with you?
Yes. Reach out to me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. Just make sure when you connect to have something in the chat or connect message. Otherwise, I won't know who you are. So LinkedIn is probably the best way. Twitter, sometimes works, sometimes not. But yeah,
Awesome.
LinkedIn's probably the best.
All right, cool. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for showing up. Have a wonderful Wednesday and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much, Cary. Really
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.